The mother of a 15-year-old accused of killing his father had hired lawyers for the teen in that trial. A year later, he would be on trial for that mother's murder. The mother who had believed him when he said it was self-defense. Now he was using the same claim on her. Shocking and disturbing information has been uncovered in this trial, including recordings from the killer explaining himself to the police as being two versions of him, Collin 1 and Collin 2. Yet this trial has caused outrage because somehow this teen described as a psychopath was found not guilty yet again for another murder of one of his parents. So let's dive into exactly what happened during the trial to lead to this, because it seemed like a very obvious cut and dry guilty verdict until they came back saying he in fact wasn't guilty. You are such a Dutyman Jim. Thank you for clicking on my video. I am Brooke Mckenna, and this is the update to the video that we did about the 17-year-old psychopath who had killed his mother after getting away with his father's murder a year prior. Now, if you haven't watched that video, I will have that linked down below. I will briefly go over some of the details in this case, as well as elaborating on those details with what has come out since the trial. Part 1 dives a lot into what the mother had gone through and the help that she had asked for in regards to her disturbed son prior to all of this, and it is just a baffling miscarriage of justice is what a lot of people are calling it. But let's dive deep into the statements, into the defense, and how this possibly could have turned out the way it did, because it's absolutely infuriating. I watched the complete about 40 hours of trial footage just to try to understand, and I still do not understand how this teen is walking free. So let's get into the story. I also want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Aura. They are perfect for the New Year's season. Aura is an all-in-one app for wellness and sleep and becoming the best version of yourself. I am already using it for meditation, breath work, life coaching, and lessons in cognitive behavioral therapy. My huge goal this year is to find inner peace and harmony and work with my brain and not against it, which has not always been a focus for me. And honestly, it's really hard to remember to do this daily. And so with Aura, which is on your phone and you're able to do it wherever you are, it's so convenient. They also have all sorts of challenges that can push you to actually build the habits that you want to and force you to be held accountable. I would love if you would want to do that with me as well, because Aura is giving you guys an exclusive 7-day free trial for the first 500 who sign up, and then you'll get 25% off the premium membership. Now let's get back to the story. So on September 8th of 2024, a murder had occurred at 77 Hewitt Drive in Auburndale. Now, this was not the first murder that this killer had carried out, yet those charges had been dismissed a year prior to having another deceased body in his presence. And many wondered, would he finally be charged this time? You see, when deputies arrived at the scene when his mother was found deceased, Collin was standing outside and he was asked what happened, and he allegedly immediately became uncooperative. He was asking to speak with a lawyer. In September of 2024, 17-year-old Collin Griffith was charged with the murder of his mother after this medical examiner found that his mother's injuries were inconsistent with the story being told by her son, that it was accidental. During a press conference, the sheriff, who was Grady Judd, stated that the murder of his mother pointed to him also murdering his father a year prior in Oklahoma, that it was not in fact self-defense as it had originally been thought.
He met the deputies outside and he was calm, cool, collected, not upset, and he had blood on him. What we found inside was this knife. This knife is 12 inches long, and of the 12 inches, 8 inches of that is the blade. So he's saying that his mother fell on this knife. The medical examiner said it is not reasonable or plausible that she died the way that he said she did. Just didn't happen. Our investigation clearly and unequivocally shows That circumstance did not occur like that. In fact, he used similar language to when he made the 911 call, 18 or 20 months earlier, when he shot and killed his father. We find out that this is not just a singular event with Collin stabbing his mother in the neck and ultimately killing her. Here's what we found, and follow me as I read a timeline to you. On February 14th, 2023, on Valentine's Day in Lincoln County, Oklahoma, Collin said that his dad pulled a knife on him, and he shot and killed his dad. That's right. His father was named Charles. He shot him once in the chest and once in the head, and he claimed self-defense. The Lincoln County Sheriff's Office and the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations charged Collin with murder in the first degree. They dropped the charges less than a month later. They said they could not disprove Collin's assertion of self-defense. When you look at this, you see a kid. When I look at him, I see a psychopath.
So law enforcement believed that he was going to trial for his mother's murder and that he was going to be found guilty this time, and then they were going to backtrack and basically charge him with murder for his father as well. But prior to his trial, Collin and his attorneys were fighting to exclude text messages from evidence to be allowed at trial. You see, his mother, Catherine, had actually accused him of murdering his father, and Collin did not want this shown to the court. A judge ultimately ruled against that, and these texts were allowed to be shown. But what wouldn't be told to the jury was who it was that Collin had been charged with killing before the charges were dismissed a year prior to his mother's murder. They would not know that this was his father, only that he killed someone else in self-defense. So the trial began on January 29th, 2025 in Polk County, Florida. This was very recent, and 17-year-old Collin Griffith was being tried as an adult in the murder of his mother, Catherine Griffith. Florida State Attorney Brian Haas decided to charge him as an adult based on the facts and circumstances of this case. He was being charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and violation of a no-contact order. Now, Collin was pleading not guilty by reason of self-defense, just like his father, even though a medical examiner ruled that Catherine's injuries could not have occurred from her just falling on the knife. So with day one, the prosecution's opening statements from prosecutor Mark Levine claimed that Collin viciously and savagely unleashed his full fury and hatred towards his mother on her, that he watched the blood come out of her neck and the life drain from her body, that this was intentional, it was planned, and that the witnesses that were planned to come and talk to the court heard his plan prior to the murder. The prosecution stated that the court would hear that a year prior to Collin killing his mom, he had murdered somebody else. That this was determined to be self-defense, and Collin had the charges dropped, and yet he was using that same defense now. As a minor, about a year prior to this, his mother had gotten custody of him, and Catherine was very excited to get the chance to have custody of Collin. But Collin did not like the chores and the rules at this new home, and the violence that Collin used against his mother was documented prior to her death, including the fear that Catherine had of her son and the documented threats of his promise to murder her. Now, the defense's opening statements by attorney Amy Thornhill claimed that this family was not very close. They had lots of estrangements and fights, and the defense claimed that all of these estrangements had a common denominator, and that was Catherine, the victim and Collin's mother. That Catherine was constantly changing her mood and her behavior, even to her mother. And the defense stated that Catherine's mother, Susan, was the one who took care of Collin the most. That the court would hear that Catherine was unstable, unreliable, unpredictable, and often threatened to take her own life, sometimes attempting to do so, as well as harming others in front of Collin. The defense argued that Collin acted in self-defense, and there was no evidence that Catherine was in the home where she was found dead against her will, as the kidnapping charges stated. Now, this was the point that Collin asked to waive his presence in the courtroom as the 911 tape was played where Collin had called the police about his mother. He said he had never heard this before, and so he was ushered out as they played it for the jury. In this call, Collin would state that his mom was bleeding out and that she needed help now. He was heard in what was described as a whimper saying, "I don't think she's alive," and then, "I think she's dead." After being instructed to do chest compressions, he was asked what caused the bleeding, to which he responded, "We got into a fight and she fell on the knife." A few minutes later, he then began to say, "She stopped bleeding. No more blood is coming out," as he seemed to explode with emotion. And I will play that for you now for you to hear personally.
Even in Florida, I don't know the fucking, I don't know the city address. My mom is talking to EMS now. She's bleeding out. Please help. Your mom is doing what? My mom is bleeding out. She's bleeding out. Okay, what's the address? Or where do you think you are? What road are you at? What crosses that road? So the Hampton in Florida, you go through the gates and you take the first right, and it's the house with the black dead out front. I'm trying to get into the Hampton Inn. The Hampton Inn, yes, ma'am. What city is it in? Well, it's Auburndale. I created a community. I can't interrupt. Okay, how do I lift someone? I need to get into the hospital. Okay, how do I lift someone? Okay, you called 911, so we're going to send an ambulance. She doesn't have time. She's bleeding it. She's fucking pale. She doesn't have time. She needs to go now. Okay, and I'm using the address I see you at. Is that right? Is that where you are? Yes, ma'am. Okay. What can I do? I have your price after. She's fucking got a... What the fuck do I do? She's bleeding out. Where is she bleeding from, sir? She's bleeding from the neck, ma'am. She's bleeding from my mother. I'm trying to keep it. Are you with the patient now? I'm with her now. How old is the patient? She's 39 years old. She has a heart condition. She has a... Is she awake? No, she's unconscious. She's not recovering. Okay. Is she breathing? No, she's not. I don't think she's alive. She's dead. Okay, where is she? Okay, and you said neck. I am by her, yes, I okay, listen carefully. Lay her flat on her back on the floor. There's anything under her head. Okay, she's good. She's good. Okay, I did it right now. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So listen, what caused the bleeding? Listen, what caused the bleeding? She got real tight and she went to the knife and she fell on it. Where is the knife right now? And who did she get in a fight with? She gave at me and we got real tight for a long time and then she got on top of me and fell on it and pushed it back. She stopped bleeding. No more blood coming out. She lost it. Where's your mother? I'm over her. I'm trying to save her. Where are you? Where's her? Where are you? Out in the kitchen, in the house. And the door is unlocked. There's no more blood coming out of the wound. She's lost it all. Okay. Yes, there's no blood. She's lost all her blood.
So the first testimony came from forensic investigator Laura Ellis that would testify that she responded to the investigation. So Ellis claimed that she and the detectives had waited for a search warrant to process the scene, and then she would enter the home to take photos. She said that she would find Catherine in the kitchen on the side of the kitchen island, and a knife block was also in the kitchen, missing a knife. A bloodied 7-inch knife was found near her, and blood was found on the lower walls as well as the cabinets, with a towel and a shirt near her head. Now, Ellis spoke about this gray camo shirt that was found near her that had a slit as well as a hole in it, and blood found under the collar. Collin Griffith's name was also written on the inside. This was identified to be his shirt, and he wasn't wearing one when they arrived. Now, Catherine's purse was also found nearby, covered in blood, and Catherine herself was found with her right arm under the kitchen island and a wide open neck wound. It was wide enough that they used a ruler to do a size comparison in the evidence photos. But Ellis also spoke about the bruises on Catherine's arms and legs, and also the wound between her thumb and her index finger, where she had a laceration that appeared to be a defense wound. She spoke about the fact that outside of the home there was a vehicle belonging to Collin found with a cell phone and a laptop inside, and they also found Collin's high school mock trial papers, which discussed a male killing a woman with blunt force trauma to the back of her head caused by a tire iron crushing her skull. Catherine's vehicle was also outside of the residence, and her AirPods were found, one outside, one inside the residence, in 2 different places. Ellis had also found Catherine's phone, and a text message was on there from Detective Lacey saying, "I tried to call you," and a missed call from Catherine's mother, Susan. Ellis then testified that she had tried the knife for fingerprints, finding none. That is when an Officer Christopher Hyde would testify, but he didn't work for the police in Florida where Catherine's murder had occurred. He worked in Oklahoma, where Collin's father had been murdered. So Officer Hyde would explain to the court that he had found this man shot in the chest and the head, and they determined that he had been shot by his son, Collin Griffith. Now, Hyde confirmed that the defendant, Collin, was arrested for this man's murder and then released on self-defense. Again, he did not say that this was Collin's father. The next testimony came from a woman named Sally K. Bell, who was a resident of the mobile home community where Catherine had been killed. This was at her mother's home in Auburndale. So this witness, Sally, lived across the street from the home, and she would state that she was headed to church that evening Catherine was killed and saw a car parked in the driveway and one in the street. She noticed that this was odd. She didn't always see those cars there. And so Sally noticed that a woman would come outside of that home with clothes in her hand. She put them in the vehicle on the passenger side, and she was also talking to a boy who had walked out with her. She suddenly began to move her arms like she was arguing with this boy, and suddenly he reached out, he grabbed her. Sally heard this woman say through her home, "Let go of my hair, you're hurting me." And then this boy pulled this woman inside. She said from inside of her home, she could hear this happening. That is how loud it was. And that was the last time she saw that woman. That woman being Catherine Griffith. Now, another neighbor of this mobile community home, Nancy Jones, was actually friends with Catherine's mother, Susan, who lived there. So she knew a bit about Susan's grandson, Collin, who was seen at this home often. So that day of the murder, Nancy was watching a woman get out of the car that was parked in the street. She went into the house. This was determined to be Catherine. A little while later, she walked outside and saw the woman on the top step right next to the front door of that home. Then she saw a hand reach out from behind Catherine and grab her and pulled her hair as he pulled her inside. Nancy said she minded her own business. She went back into her house at that point, though she stated when the police finally arrived, she had called Susan because she knew Susan, and Susan had asked her to go over and tell Collin that she would be there soon. So Collin's grandmother, Susan, was going to head back to help him. So Nancy said that she walked over to Collin to tell him this while the police were surrounding him, and that Collin was emotional. But responding Deputy Alexander Walker explained that when he arrived on the scene, he had walked into the home and heard a male saying, "I'm in the kitchen." He then found Collin over his mother's head. He was shirtless, and instead of performing the CPR as he had told the dispatcher he was doing, he was in an odd position over her head to be doing so. But he had blood on his forearms and his hands that was then washed off by the EMS when he walked outside. Deputy Walker stated that Collin was in somewhat of a manic state when he first saw him, but once he got outside, he appeared very calm and collected. He was then placed in the back of a cop car, and Deputy Walker said that they were talking about very normal things like video games. He said Collin seemed more cheerful at this point and was even saying that he liked more strategic video games. Now, during cross-examination, Deputy Walker was asked by the defense if there was enough room in the kitchen for CPR to even be done, implying that there wasn't. Deputy Walker was then chastised for not reading Collin his Miranda rights when he was in the back of the cop car. The defense attorney was asking him if he had ever had a parent die in front of him, saying that the deputy did not know how Collin normally acted, that calm and collected might have been a trauma response. But when Deputy Walker was asked if he believed that Collin was being calm and collected in the 911 call, Deputy Walker said that he did seem calm in the beginning before responders arrived. This is when several first responders would testify that Collin was acting odd and at some times seemed annoyed with the situation and investigators. They said that they had seen all types of situations and reactions due to traumatic scenes, but that Collin's behavior specifically stood out to them. In fact, Captain James Parker for Fire and Rescue stated that they waited nearby for law enforcement to enter this residence first after the 911 call, and that Catherine was dead upon arrival. He found her wound extremely deep because while they were trying to do CPR, air was actually coming out. Captain Parker said that when he entered and saw Collin was quite calm, and when the deputies were trying to get him outside, he was a bit argumentative. He said his behavior was odd, and that was with his 11 years on the force. This was the situation that stood out to him. Captain Parker said that Collin was not distraught. He was not upset or in tears, which is the most common reaction. Another first responder, who was Owen Mullen, the lead paramedic, stated that he could see all the way to the back of Catherine's neck from the stab wound, and that Collin seemed annoyed with the deputies rather than upset at this entire situation. On January 30th, day 2 of trial, it started with forensic investigator Brandy Bange. She had tested blood swabs from the fingernails as well as DNA swabs from Collin. She said he had blood on his right ear, the right arm of his glasses, his fingernails, his shoes, and his shorts. She stated he had no wounds on his hands. Again, this professional stated that his emotions did not change. He didn't show any emotion. So during cross-examination, the defense asked if it was possible to get blood under his fingernails from cleaning up the blood or from doing CPR, and she said it was possible. Michelle Peters with the forensic unit then spoke about the autopsy of Catherine. Peters stated she had gone to the ME's office of Dr. David Garavan and saw the wounds up close, and she was able to see that the knife had actually exited the other side of her neck. Catherine also had bruises and scrapes all over her body. Now, this is when Collin's behavior is thrown into the mix and the documentation of that is revealed. So Sergeant Michael Snyder spoke about working for the CSU, or the Crisis Stabilization Unit of the Charlotte Behavioral Center in Florida. So basically, the psychiatric unit is where Collin had been taken under the Baker's Act after the attack of his mother in September of 2023, exactly a year before her her murder. So Sergeant Snyder was called there for a potentially dangerous patient referring to Collin. Collin was about to be released and they were concerned that he might act out. However, Collin stayed very calm and he told the sergeant he needed to be Baker acted once again to stay at the facility. Now, a Baker Act is basically in Florida when you can keep a person somewhere for the belief that they will harm themselves or someone else. And so Collin would explain to this sergeant that he was either going to kill himself or his mother if he was released. The sergeant said that a lot of people do that in order to stay in the facility, so he didn't believe him at first, and he asked him how he was going to do that. Well, Collin looked at him and said that he would find a way, before listing several different ways that he would. He was very insistent, and another officer claimed that Collin not only threatened to kill his mother, but his grandmother. This was a fact not dependent on anything else. At this point, the second Baker Act was put into place as he was a danger to himself and his mother, so he was readmitted to the behavioral center at this time. And like I said, exactly a year later, he was being charged with his mother's murder. But the reason that he was placed into the Charlotte Behavioral Center in Florida, well, this is what we talked about in the previous video. Collin had spoken to a school police officer who believed that their mental check needed to be made due to Collin's statements at school. Collin was alleging that his mother, Catherine, had pulled him during an argument and threatened to kill him or herself. So when the sheriff arrived at their home to do this check, Catherine told a different story. She said that Collin was upset with her because she had taken his phone and AirPods because he was failing classes. She said none of the threats were true and that he had been diagnosed with personality disorder and PTSD after being held captive by his father for 1,000 days. While he was in this facility, staff would say that Collin told them that he would throw his mother out of the car or shoot her or stab her. But the most shocking revelation about this stay was that Collin was stating, "I've done it before to my dad. I can do it again." So during this trial, this is when we would get a bit more information on the recent documentation of the violence between Collin and Catherine. You see, 2 months after that Baker's Act, the second time, this was in November of 2023, he was living with his mother, and his mother would call the police on him for domestic violence. So Deputy Alexander Sharp had actually handled the call that day on November 14th, 2023, and when he made contact with Collin, Collin was actually returning to the scene. He appeared very calm and collected.
I can't see without my glasses. I don't know where they went. Hi.
Hello.
Who's who?
I'm Deputy Jankowski.
I got off the phone with Rentis. We sat down and we ate, and she started talking to me about how a bunch of really bad shit. And then when I got up and was like, "You can't just do that," and she was telling me to shut up, she hit me in the face, and then I reacted like this. She grabbed onto me. I hit her in the stomach, and then. I'm a wrestler. It was just reactive. Grabbed her. She got to the ground. I grabbed the phone. I started recording and then I left. Okay, that's it.
So she hit you in the face?
Yeah.
But we've been through this. You called Rentis because you know you kind of messed up, right?
No, it's because I didn't know who else to call, and I knew that, and I wanted to make sure he knew first off.
Okay.
Catherine, on the other hand, he said appeared nervous, scared, and quiet. He said she appeared to be scared of her son and had bruises and swelling on her stomach, and stated that Collin had kneed her in the stomach as well as stomping on her hand. So Deputy Sharp had gathered that Collin was told that he would have his cell phone and Xbox taken away from him due to his behavior, and that is when he attacked.
I heard EMS is coming to check out your hand. Okay. Let me.
Right here, because he kicked me.
Okay. Hey, can I see your hand? Okay.
He kicked the phone out of my hand as I was trying to record it. I was on the ground. It hurts. I mean, you can see how swollen my knuckles are. It's okay. He literally, stomped on my hand to get the phone out of my hand.
Let me see the inside of your hand. All right, do you have any pain to your wrist at all? Or is it just right here in the top of your hand?
No, it's
all
from,
of this?
Yeah, from here till about here.
Okay. When did that happen?
When he attacked me.
Like Like, was that like a couple minutes ago, an hour ago?
Like in the past 20, 30 minutes. And then he takes me here. I have like some redness.
Now, this was the incident we spoke about in the prior video where Catherine's mother, Susan, was also there and stood up for Catherine, corroborated her story.
We talked all the way down, and I said, you have got to learn to get your anger under control. You want to be a Marine. People are going to get it. I'm retired from the service. I said,
So am I.
Very good. So I said, people are going to get in your face, and you're going to have to learn to deal with that. You just ignore it.
Right.
And I said, the other thing, too, is you don't ever hit anybody. You don't even touch somebody. And especially somebody as small as Kathy. That is just something that you cannot ever do. I said, that needs to be. He goes, no, but I said, there are no buts. That's all there is. So we got here. She's going to lay the law down. You know, that she is the parent. She is doing what she thinks is best for him. That he's not going to have his cellular phone. He's not going to have access because he's like talking to some person on online that we don't even know who this person is.
Okay.
And that she said, I don't want you ever calling me a psychopathic narcissist anymore. I said, and he goes, no, I didn't. He goes, no, I heard you say that. So.
Okay.
He just, you know, he had said that in the past. So, but I was very worried she was on the ground, and I went in between them.
Collin had no wounds on him, and he was actually arrested for battery of his mother at that time. So Catherine then told the deputy that she was afraid of her son and didn't want him living with her. But new information was revealed. Body cam footage was found from that night, the night of the arrest, where Collin was in the back of the cop car and he was talking to his grandmother. But his grandmother called him out on lying at that time, saying, that's not what happened, Collin.
You have to get your anger under control, okay? I'm saying prayers for you all the time, Collin, and I love you.
Mama.
What? I can't hear you. What?
No.
Do you think your anger is fine?
Yes, it's just when someone attacks me, that's how I act.
That didn't happen, though. I was there. I saw it. I saw you stand up. And I said, sit down, and you wouldn't. And you went after the phone. And the next thing I know, she's on the floor. And I'm trying to get in between you all, and I'm trying to call Rennis.
No. She hit me. She grabbed onto me. I beat her, and then I got her to the ground, and then wrestling me, and then I left.
I didn't see that, Collin. I really didn't.
I'm not a psychopath. I'm not this murderer. I'm just trying to peacefully leave or peacefully coexist and just figure something out. And she kept telling me to shut up and shut up. And when I wouldn't shut up, she hit me.
No, that's not what happened, Collin. That's not what happened. You never said you wanted to peacefully coexist.
I've been saying that.
You said that in the car, but not there with her.
During cross-examination, the defense made sure to point out that Collin was actually the one that called 911 that day, and he told the officers that his mother punched him. The defense also stated that Catherine's mother, Susan's statement wasn't the same as Catherine's. The defense also stated that Catherine was the one who was abusive and toxic and was making threats towards her son. But this arrest had come just after Collin had come back home to live with Catherine after being placed in a long-term mental health facility after his second Baker's Act. So he had a few months where they had booked him into this mental health facility, but they had released him back into his mother's care because after a period of time, that's what they do without any cause to do so. But this arrest for domestic violence didn't stop Collin from telling everyone that he would do it again if he was released, that he would kill his mother. Still, he was released until the staff told the police what he was threatening.
She thinks that I'm like psychotic, like literally psychopath, sociopath, something like that. I don't know exactly where she's at. She thinks I'm going to kill her. I want to kill her, or that I want to beat the shit out of her.
Do you?
No, sir.
Did you make any statements saying that you were going to kill
No,
your
sir.
mom
No, sir.
if you got in a car with her?
No, sir.
I'm trying to figure out why we would have a corporal at the jail that took you out, that dropped you off with your mom and telling us that you said, don't put me in a car with her, I'm going to kill her.
Yeah,
Was that said?
I did not say I was going to kill her. I did not say kill. I don't know why he sent me back here. I asked him not to, but he said he didn't like my attitude and that I had to just work on it, and he sent me back here. But his words, not mine.
And on body cam footage, as officers sent him back to his mother, they were heard apologizing to Catherine on their body cam footage, saying, "I struggle with a kid that's being released from jail, saying if you bring me back here, she's going to die. If we don't do something, then shame on us. We didn't do our job and we failed you. And I'm not failing you, nor am I going to fail your son." Because when deputies were pressing Collin on his threats, he said, "I'm in a constant state of fight or flight and I don't know. If I think she's going to do something, even if she's not, I might act. I'm not going to go crazy or anything, but I'm not sure, honestly." From there on out, officers would be in contact with Catherine in regards to her and her son's safety. Now, a juvenile detective was involved with Collin's case starting that September 2023, and she would testify that he had told her multiple times that he wouldn't be able to control how he acted towards his mother if he was sent to live with her. The juvenile detective said they tried to mentor it out of him. This obviously didn't work. The detective said it was clear that Catherine loved her son and knew what he was capable of, but was willing to accept her fate if it meant she had more time with her son. During cross-examination, the defense began to ask this juvenile detective about Catherine's reports with DCF, Child Protective Services, which had to do with her ex-husband, saying that her sons had to watch this prior to her and her husband's divorce back in 2020. That there were several attempts to life throughout that time, and they were depicting her as the cause of Collin's violent behavior and her own murder. You see, what we spoke about in the previous video was that Catherine was married to Charles or Chuck Griffith and had the two sons, including Collin, with him. Now, they had a very abusive relationship. There was a lot of incidents that happened, but in 2020, they had separated. Collin had moved in with his father, which is where he said he was held captive for 1,000 days before he killed him in self-defense. And that is when he went in to move with his mother, and a year later did the same.
So how long ago was your dad passed? Sorry to hear that.
7 months.
7 months?
Yeah. He attacked me, my dad, and when he did, he tried to kill me overnight, and then it was in Oklahoma, and he died. So, yeah.
How was that?
I shot him when he tried to kill me.
Did you already have a gun? Or did you go
I
get
was
one?
fleeing, and the house was filled with guns, to be exact, and
you knew who they were?
I didn't seek one out, I was just trying to run, but when I was cornered and I had nothing else, there was a gun, just kind of what happened.
Why was he trying to kill you?
He's also a bit of a case, but homophobia. He's a bit of other stuff.
Oh,
But during day 2 of trial, a recording of Collin being spoken to by a juvenile detective back in 2023 was played. And this is when Collin would be heard saying that there was 2 versions of him. Collin 1 and Collin 2. Collin 1, he said, is just who wants to survive, to help people do good things in the world. But Collin 2 protects Collin 1 from things he can't escape from. Collin 2 is the one that killed someone, but he said they were talking to Collin 1.
I'll say it to you like this, if you want to know. Collin 1 is, I guess, he's who just wants to survive, help people, and do good things in the world. And Collin 2 is the one that protects Collin 1 in situations where he can't escape from. And Collin 2 is the one that killed someone. But you're talking to Collin 1. You're talking to Collin 1. The one who just wants to help people and just wants to.
So that clip appears to be from November 14th, 2023 at 1:59 a.m. Is that correct?
yes, sir.
Trying to figure out exactly what you're scared of. Without having you descripted and you giving me some sense of something. Scared of going back in there, Rentis. Jesus, how many times do I gotta say it? That's all I'm scared of. That's it. I'm fucking scared of that call. Yes, I am, Rentis, because what's it gonna come down to next time? I don't think you're a pussy. I think that you are capable of killing your mother, but I don't think that you will. It's the strongest version of me.
Did you hear Corporal Moore, the defendant, saying, yeah, he would, as it pertains to Collin 1, allowing him to kill his mom?
I did, sir.
I don't know how I'm going to react when she does that again. If I can control myself, or how that's going to happen. What do you think you might do to her if she tries to hit me again? I might hit her back really, really hardly and badly. You're gonna hurt? Yeah.
Now, day 3 of trial, January 31st of 2025, with Dr. David Garavan, the medical examiner. He would testify that he had given the autopsy to Catherine Griffith, and he had found sharp force injury to the right side of the neck, which was gaping and open, 4.3 centimeters long and 1 centimeters apart from a single blade, which was traveling from front to back with the blade coming out the other side. She also had bruises to her shoulder, bruises to her left elbow, the back of both hands, her limbs, and she had an incised wound, which means long but not deep, between the thumb and the index finger that was 1.5 centimeters. He stated the bruises all looked fresh and Catherine wasn't alive long enough for them to start healing. And the force needed to travel through her entire neck and through the trachea, which is a tougher organ, would have actually required pressure to get through. He said the cause of death was determined as a stab wound to the right neck, and the manner of death was determined to be homicide. Dr. Garavan would state that it would be rather extraordinary if this was accidental. During cross-examination, the defense wanted to talk about a fight. If both people had these reactive defense wounds, both could have also suffered offensive wounds. So the defense was trying to infer that the wounds that led to Catherine's death did not necessarily mean that she was the victim. However, the medical examiner was certain that she had died from the action of another human, or homicide. Then Robert Wallantes, Collin's grandfather, testified. This was Catherine's father. This was the first family member of Catherine and Collin's to testify. And Robert said, "Collin is my grandson and I love him, but..." And that is when he was cut off by an objection from the defense. But Robert was joyous when he was shown photos of himself and his daughter. Robert was saying that Catherine was so happy that Collin was moving back in with her in 2023. She helped him catch up on 3 years of school that he had missed and an extra 4th year to get him ahead because she was a teacher. They were often taking vacations. They were traveling together. And Robert stated that he didn't actually see them much, but he would talk to Collin on the phone because he lived so far away.
Is it difficult for you to be here today?
It is.
And what are your thoughts about the defendant?
He's my grandson. I love him. But I...
Sustained. When the defendant moved back to Florida to live with Kathy, was Kathy happy about that?
She was thrilled.
But Robert spoke about a time when he was on the phone with Collin and he was very aggravated at his grandmother and mother.
My grandson was very aggravated at his grandmother and his mother. He said, "I am so tired of these two. I'm disgusted." He said, "My mom, I keep thinking over and over, I want to slit her throat. I want her to bleed out. I want to smell the blood. I want to feel the blood. I want to feel the life and the blood leaving her body."
Now, when he said that, what went through your mind?
I needed to take a deep breath and do what I could to discourage that thought, because thoughts become words, words become actions.
What did you say to him in response?
I said, "Collin, I love you, buddy, but you can't have those kinds of thoughts and focus on them and then speak them, because you will cause them to become reality. Please think positive things about your mom, about yourself, and about a good future together."
He didn't even tell his daughter those exact words because he thought it would give her nightmares. Catherine was telling Robert that Collin had threatened her before. She was used to this. During cross-examination, the defense asked if he had memory problems. He said that sometimes he thought something happened during a certain period of time when it was another time, but he didn't really have memory problems. And then she asked when Collin made these threats, and he responded that it was 4 months before the murder. The defense then asked him not to use that term, as it was up to the jury to decide if it was murder. Now, day 4, so February 3rd, 2023, started with Catherine's mother, Susan Detman, or Collin's grandmother, testifying. And this is what infuriated a lot of people. You see, her home had been the crime scene, but she was out of town at the time, so she was not there. She was also the ex-wife of Robert Willantis, who had testified the day prior. Susan stated that she often paid for Collin and Catherine's vacations and lifestyle. She said that her ex-husband Robert was not invited to Catherine's funeral due to his disruptive nature and his lies. Susan began to say that Catherine was taking pills and drinking, and in January of 2024, Susan had watched Collin for a brief period, and that during that year she had 6 attempts to take her life. Susan said that she and Catherine didn't speak for quite some time in 2024, that they would often get in fights, and she would stop speaking to family for periods of time. Basically, Susan spoke that her daughter was unreliable, unstable, and a compulsive liar, that she was controlling and manipulative, that she was abusive to her ex-husband, stabbing him with a corkscrew, burning him, pinning him with a car, that Collin was aware of all that she threatened to kill her ex-husband's new girlfriend's family. Susan stated that Catherine pulled a gun on Collin and then handed it to him, telling him to shoot her. Susan stated that she knew that Collin was at her home in Auburndale the day of the murder, and that she told Catherine not to go there because Susan thought that she would do something to Collin. This was all after Susan herself was recorded corroborating Catherine's story of domestic violence and telling Collin that he was lying. She now seemed to be defending Collin in court, and Collin sat silently as she did so. During cross-examination, the prosecution asked Susan if she was concerned about Collin being violent after he had killed someone before. Susan said that he wasn't the one violent with Catherine, that Catherine was violent with him. Susan said that she has been talking to Collin while he's been in jail, and that she did not want to see her grandson go to prison for something he didn't do.
Today here in court in front of the jury, you've talked about that you were concerned that Kathy was going to attack your grandson, and then you listed a bunch of different weapons. But weren't you more concerned that your grandson, who had killed someone before and had been violent countless times with your daughter, weren't you concerned that he was the one that was going to attack your daughter?
No. He had not been violent countless times with Kathy. Kathy had been violent with him countless times.
Now, a lot of the things you've said here today, you never bothered to tell me or law enforcement or anyone.
Objection. Judge, it's improper impeachment.
Would you say that you talked to your grandson on the phone?
I usually talk to him 3 times. I encourage him to pray. I ask him if he's eating. I mean, I'm a dietitian, that's what I do. That he's drinking his milk, that he's exercising in his cell, and most important, that he's reading books. And I keep telling him, you have got to pray. You have got to read your Bible.
Now, I mean, this is an obvious question, but you love your grandson, correct?
Yes.
Your daughter is dead, clearly.
Yes.
And she's not coming back, correct?
No.
Now, would you agree that you don't want to see the defendant have to go to prison for a very long time? Is that correct?
I don't want to see my grandson go to prison for something he didn't do.
All right. Well, you couldn't make it any more crystal clear that you're up there and all your answers that you've given have been driven by you believing that the defendant, your grandson, didn't murder your daughter, correct?
I am giving clear answers, sir, as to what happened. I know my daughter. That's why I didn't want her coming that day to the house without me being there. I wanted her to wait the next day so that maybe she could calm down a little bit.
Oh, you know your grandson too, correct?
Yes.
And you know his history, correct?
Yes. I just know the facts about Kathy, having lived with her and worked with her, even to try to maintain her sanity.
Ma'am, it sounds like you're really quick to try to throw dirt on your dead daughter. Would you agree with that?
No, not at all. My dead daughter did the best that she could. We have a problem in this country with addressing mental health. We all know that. And that's what she had.
She blamed this on the fact that when she was 13, Catherine Griffith had run away from home and gotten pregnant, and that her father, Robert, told Catherine over and over she would amount to nothing. So the prosecution then brought up Catherine's ex-husband, who was that Chuck Griffith, who was killed in self-defense by Collin, but the court did not know that this was the same man. But he had been the one that got her pregnant at 13. And that was their first son, and then later on they would have Collin. But prosecution also said that Chuck had an inappropriate relationship with one of Catherine's students and that he was very abusive, which led to their divorce. Now, Chuck Griffith was also the one that Catherine and Collin claimed had kept Collin hostage and isolated him in his home for 1,000 days prior to Collin shooting him to death. Catherine's mother, Susan, then agreed that Catherine had told her many times she was afraid of her safety due to Collin. So on day 5 of trial, February 4th, 2025, the prosecution's closing statements told the jury that the killing was premeditated murder after he kidnapped his mother. That witnesses saw Catherine being drugged into the home, begging for her son to stop, that it was Operation Kill Mom accomplished, that Catherine did anything and everything to make this boy happy, even buying him a car, and that the death was not accidental, that his bloodlust was quenched with his mom, that he waited an hour and 15 minutes from Catherine pulling up to the home to call 911. The prosecutor said she left this world knowing that the person that took her out was the son that she gave everything to. The defense's closing statements countered that Catherine Griffith was violent and impulsive, that Catherine's father Robert's statements came from an unreliable witness as he had waited weeks to provide information to the investigators and he wasn't allowed at her funeral, that the state did not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Catherine was kidnapped, and the defense suggested that Catherine committed suicide by son. The defense attorney said, "Isn't it more reasonable, given everything you know, that Kathy picked up the knife, threatened Collin with it, and he defended himself?" On day 6, February 5th of 2025, after the jury had deliberated for 11 hours, they found that the state did not prove what happened inside the home to be murder. Collin Griffith was then acquitted of the first-degree murder charges, kidnapping charges, and this was for the second time of both of his parents. Collin smiled as the verdict was read, and he has since walked out of jail as a free man.
To count 1, the defendant is not guilty. As to count 2, the defendant is not guilty.
With an embrace from his defense team, Collin Griffith learned he will not be a convicted murderer.
Now, Sheriff Grady Judd, who has been on this case since the beginning, he made a statement saying, "Our detectives firmly believe that Collin Griffith murdered his mother. The jury determined that they could not convict him beyond and to the exclusion of all reasonable doubt. During our investigation, detectives found witnesses that believe he also murdered his father in Oklahoma. That investigation is ongoing." Some have described this as a horrifying miscarriage of justice, and many are outraged that this has not only happened once, but now twice. And now this teenager has learned that he could get away with murder 2 times. And if he could murder his own parents in cold blood, will he have any problem killing strangers next? The scary part is he is almost an adult, meaning there will be no supervision of him at all. He will be a free, grown man roaming this earth without even any probation or parole, knowing that he watched both of his parents die by his hands and he didn't even get jail time for it. I'm absolutely horrified and bewildered that this is the outcome. I truly believed when we filmed that last video that it was finally going to be a realization for the court, for everybody who had found him not guilty by reason of self-defense for his father, that they were finally going to realize that that was not the truth and he was going to be retried for that, and that he definitely was going to be found guilty of the murder of his mother. After so many people have documented, not even just if his grandfather is an unreliable witness, okay, but professionals have documented over and over again him saying that he was going to kill his mother. But now suddenly it's self-defense because he actually did it? I'm confused and I'm angered. And I truly believe that this is a miscarriage of justice. I am horrified for our world that he is just free to do whatever he wants. Right now, he could be walking right next to you. Right now, he could be coming up with his next murder plot. How did this happen? How can we stop it from happening again? Is there anything that we can do now that he's been acquitted of both of his parents' murders? How far can we take self-defense? Is it because he was a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old that they looked at him as this child that couldn't have done this? Because it seems to me that in both cases, they acknowledged he had done it. It wasn't that he didn't. It was that they were trying to prove that it was the victim's fault that it was done in both cases. And the fact that it actually worked, that defense actually worked again, blows my mind. Oh, leave your anger down below because I want to know that I'm not the only one that is absolutely infuriated and outraged, and I had to talk about it. And I just cannot believe that this is what actually occurred. What does this world come to? What is the justice system if this is what we get? I have a lot of questions as far as Collin's grandmother, Catherine's mother, Susan, and her testimony. If you watch any of it, it's very odd. She seems very scripted at some point. She talks a lot and goes way into detail on questions, which is often known to occur when you are lying. And that's just alleged. We don't know, but she gives a lot of details, and the fact that she completely flipped it on her daughter, who is deceased, and was defending the grandson that she had once told to stop lying about the abuse he had committed against his mother. I don't know. I feel like this family has a lot of issues, a lot of darkness that we probably don't even know about. But the documentation of threats and of behaviors that were dangerous. I mean, homicidal ideations were something that he was known to struggle with. The medical examiner determined it was homicide. I knew that I had to tell you guys, and I wanted to break down each moment of the trial to see if we could uncover a reason why maybe the jury couldn't find him guilty. And while I understand that there has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, I just feel like it's baffling to me. I was not expecting this at all. Were you? After hearing what happened in the trial, can you see how the jury came to this decision? I don't have a doubt in my mind that we will hear about Collin Griffith and his further crimes in the future. And I hate to say that. So thank you for listening. Do not forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Oh, and by the way, I have a vlog channel. If you didn't know, I've been vlogging more recently about setting up our home, redecorating it, and just like everything that I do behind the scenes of these true crime videos. If you want to get to know a more personal side of me, I also have a personal TikTok and a true crime TikTok. Basically, I'm everywhere. If you want to follow me other places, I do lots of other content if you are interested. Okay, bye.